Good afternoon, class. Today we're going to talk about appositives, essential or non-essential appositives. To put a comma or to not put a comma, that is the question, right? So, going back, we talked about essential and non-essential multiple times. Essential is necessary, non-essential means it's not necessary. And so, we've talked about this over and over and over again in class. When something's not necessary in the sentence, it is offset with commas. And so if it's not necessary or non-essential in this case, you're going to put a comma at the start of the thing that is not necessary, in this case the appositive, and you would put it at the end as well. So you're marking or separating, remember that's what commas do, commas separate, you're separating that non-essential appositive. So what does this all mean? Well, let's take a look. So if we're going to reference last week's activity, you'll notice that all of the underlined words there, an excerpt from your average N-word. Number 2, an assistant professor at the University of Iowa. Number 3, a state that leads incarcerating black men. 4, another professor at the university. All of these are added information. They're like bonus material. We know very specifically from the subjects that they are what they are. So Prelude, the barbershop, that references the specific excerpt that you read. Young is the writer. We know who that person is. White Iowa, hopefully we know what Iowa is. Him making it white and making it a proper noun makes it even more specific. And then Sean Eversley, you can't get any more specific than a person's full name. So all the stuff that comes after that are appositive phrases that are not necessary. They are non-essential for you to understand the sentence. And so they are offset in commas. And so if you look at the first one, again, excerpt is the appositive to the subject Prelude, the barbershop. Professor is the appositive to the subject Young. State is the appositive to the subject White Iowa. Professor is the appositive to the subject Eversley. So if you were reading the Prelude, the barbershop, this all comes from Young. It's very specific, so we don't need to add that professor or state or professor again. All these are added material that we have. So there, as I said earlier, there's two types of appositives. There is the essential appositive, and what that means for an essential positive, it means that the appositive or the appositive phrase is necessary for the sentence to make sense. In other words, the noun that precedes it is not specific enough for the reader to know exactly what the author is talking about. So if I said the cat, and we wouldn't know exactly what that cat is. If I said the cat, and you gave a specific name, the cat Zoe, which is my cat, right? You would know specifically that that's the cat. It restricts the type of cat it is. It makes it only about Zoe. And so that would be essential. And so you would not, in that case, you would not use any punctuation. So non-essential means that the appositive phrase or the appositive is not necessary. In other words, the noun that precedes it is specific enough for the reader to know what the author's talking about. So if I was talking about Zoe, my cat, and I started a sentence, Zoe, my cat would not be necessary because Zoe would be specific enough for the sentence. So why should you care about all this? Well, it's punctuation. Again, I make jokes all the time with you guys that, you're not going to be hanging out and be like, dude, nice appositive, right? That's not what you're going to be doing. But if you are doing something formal like writing a paper or even an email, it might be helpful to understand where the punctuation goes. And sometimes it really helps as well, because if you don't have the commas in the right spot, then the sentence might not make sense also, and that can be problematic too. So if it is essential, then you don't need commas. If it's non-essential, in other words, not necessary, then you offset it. So referencing last week, if you look at the blue parts here, this shows that the commas are offsetting that. In other words, what it's doing is it's denoting where it starts and where it ends. Where it starts, where it ends, where it starts, where it ends. It is the appositive, right, in what I'm talking about. So where the appositive starts and where the appositive ends. This is called offsetting. So what it's doing is it's offsetting that interrupter or that added extra material that we don't necessarily need for the sentence to make sense. Dude, bonus material. All right. So non-essential positives are just bonus material. It's like buying the Blu-ray box set of Stranger Things. You don't necessarily need to, look at all the bonus material at the end of the DVD to understand what's going on, or the Blu-ray rather. But it does give you some bonus clarification that's going to allow you to enjoy the series even more. In other words, it gives you a little bit of flair. So at the heart of appositives, especially ones that are non-essential, consider it bonus material. And so if it's bonus material, you're going to offset those in commas. Again, I can't stress enough that commas separate. So what the commas are doing there when they're separating in a non-essential positive is they're demarcating or setting where the bonus material or appositive starts and where it ends, thus separating the bonus material from the rest of the clause. So look at the sentence there below. Mr. Beretta, a hot-headed baseball player, threw all the bats on the field. I actually did this at one point. I think it was my sophomore year in high school. Probably very embarrassing. But in any case, we already know who Mr. Beretta is. We can judge by the action that he's probably a bit of a hothead. And so that hot-headed baseball player is just added material. It's bonus material that adds to the sentence and gives it a little flair. So with essential appositives, you're going to hold those commas. So unlike non-essential appositives, essential appositives need to be there for you to understand the sentence, you being the reader here. So for example, the popular song This Is America is performed by Childish Gambino, no commas. My teacher, Mr. Beretta, has a self-deprecating sense of humor, no commas. My friend Samantha has a nose piercing, no commas. The pitcher, Sean Manaea, pitched a no-hitter for the Oakland A's. So in all these cases, we don't know what, 1, the song, 2, the teacher, and second sentence teacher, 3, sentence 3, friend, or 4, the pitcher is. The popular song could have been anything. The teacher could have been someone else. The friend could have been many of your friends. The pitcher could have been the thousands of different pitchers, although pitching a no-hitter does narrow it down. It could have been Dallas Braden or Mike Fiers, right, or Catfish Hunter. But in this case, it's Sean Manaea, so it restricts it, it's essential, and it needs to be there. So when something needs to be there, it has to be there, and therefore, no commas. So let's switch things up. We're going to use kind of essentially the same sentences, but we're gonna flip the order around a little bit. So This Is America, comma, a popular song, is performed by Childish Gambino. Mr. Beretta, my teacher, has a self-deprecating sense of humor. Samantha, my friend, has a nose piercing. Sean Manaea, a pitcher, pitched a no-hitter for the A's. Notice how a popular song, my teacher, my friend, a pitcher are all offset in commas. Why? Because we have that very specific noun out in front. We have This Is America out in front. That specifies that song. It's already restricted to that one song. Mr. Beretta, there's only one Mr. Beretta. I don't mean that in a conceited way. There's only one Samantha, and there's only one Sean Manaea. So in all these cases, after the specific noun, the rest of it's bonus material. And you notice Sean Manaea, a pitcher, right? That ends up becoming kind of clumsy even because it's really not necessary, right? Because Sean Manaea, we can guess that he was the pitcher when he pitched a no-hitter. So keep those kind of things in mind that when they're non-essential, they're going to be offset. So there are some tricky ones, and you can go online and go down the rabbit hole of all these different tricky ones and their reasonings and so on and so forth. But I'm going to try to simplify it as best I can here for you. So my English teacher, Mr. Beretta, has a self-deprecating sense of humor. Most grammarians would agree that you would offset Mr. Beretta here because you could argue that you only have one English teacher, at least at this particular moment. So, if you happen to have two English teachers, then I guess that you could argue you'd have two English teachers, and we'll talk about that in a second. My best friend, comma, Samantha, comma, has a nose piercing. Why are we offsetting Samantha? Because the argument here is that this is non-essential because best friends assumes that you only have one best friend. You can't have a best friend and then a best friend, and otherwise they wouldn't be best, right? They'd be simply a friend. So keep that in mind. My pet Atticus is really cute. In this case, this is essential because we don't know what pet of mine it is. In this case, it is Atticus. And so Atticus, as you've seen in my other videos, is awfully cute, right? Again, these are tricky. Should you worry? No, you should not worry. I would not worry about the tricky ones. After all, you can argue that you have more than one English teacher or best friend. If that is truly the case, then it is essential, right? You wouldn't use commas and you would be correct. I think what's important to understand here is that grammar is malleable and it depends on the situation in this case. And if you watch the Khan Academy videos for appositives, they are not good. They do a poor job of understanding that grammar is malleable and depends on the situation. So it's funny, if you go and watch it, there's actually underneath in the comments section, there's dueling answers and conflicting answers. And I believe it deals with, if I recall correctly, it deals with a first grade teacher. My first grade teacher, Mrs. Lincoln, I don't know, is nice or something like that. Their argument was to offset it because there's only one first grade English teacher, but the very next comment said, no, you shouldn't offset it because how do we know that you don't have more than one English teacher and one first grade teacher, and therefore, it's essential. I would argue that probably it's essential. I know I had at one point I had multiple first grade teachers, and I know some people have had only one first grade teacher. So in that case, it would depend on your kind of worldview there or what was actually the case. So should you be concerned about that kind of stuff? I know I wouldn't. That's for the grammarians to argue over, and I wouldn't concern myself with that. Be concerned about punctuating the ones that are not tricky. So the ones that are obviously bonus material, you need to obviously offset those with commas. All right, I hope I cleared some things up for you. Maybe I shouldn't have finished with the should you worry part or the tricky ones, but I want you to walk away with this knowing, don't worry. If you have a professor giving you a hard time, say, hey, this is essential, therefore I didn't offset it. And there we go. Whoa, you know what essential positive is? And that should impress them enough to at least not knock your grade down too bad. All right, have a good day, everybody. Bretta out.